Check, check. How's everybody doing tonight? That was a really good reception. I appreciate that. Great. So, my name is Bruce Stanley, independent candidate for Florida governor, believe it or not. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. I want to thank 1306 for being gracious enough to open up their venue for us. This is the official opening launch party for my candidacy for governor. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself, tell you a little bit about my campaign, what my thoughts are, what my priorities are. So I was born and raised in Rhode Island, small town Rhode Island. I went to school studied computer animation at Full Sail, right outside Orlando. And then I ended up here in Miami in about 2005. So I've been a 13-year resident of Miami. And I could say that it's a lot different than when I originally got here. This is a place that changes very, very quickly. In some cases for the better, and in a lot of ways for the worse. And we're gonna talk a little bit about that. What brought me into the political arena? My profession. I'm a designer. When I moved down here to Miami, if I hadn't moved to Miami, I probably would have gotten a studio job. Moving to Miami, obviously, it's a very entrepreneurial place. My skill set was translated into design, and I teamed up with a business partner for my own LLC, and that's really the future that I was looking towards. However, I was not able to focus on my professional career because I found myself getting involved in the world of activism, getting involved in issues and cause-based activism, because I was looking around at what was happening, and I didn't find it acceptable. The bank bailouts continuing despite a new presidential administration. That's what brought me into the Occupy movement back in 2011. Lived at the camp outside Government Center for about 3 months. And experiences like that really affected me, really changed me, helped me understand the deep structural inequalities and the deep structural problems that we have here in this country. So when I first moved here, the first friends that I made were in the activist community. And we started up a little organization called Emerge Miami back in 2005. And Emerge Miami has been meeting every single Tuesday on a weekly basis since then, going back 13 years. There's very few organizations in Miami that have that kind of tradition. And so over time, I developed a real love for this place, but the decisions that I was seeing made at the city and the county level, this just forced me to learn about governmental process, learn about the legislative process, learn about how it's supposed to function and how it actually functions. So I was involved in organizing the March Against Monsanto Miami for the past 6 years. This is the largest march that would occur on an annual basis, and every single year we were blacked out by the media. And these experiences helped me to understand how our society is broken. It's not healthy when the media is covering up important information, like the fact that there's toxic carcinogenic poison all over our food and our snack foods. This is not a major issue. This is not being discussed by the political and media class. Well, it took us 6 years, but you may have heard a couple weeks ago, a verdict was just issued in a San Francisco court against Monsanto. A groundskeeper was awarded $239 million because it was linked to Monsanto, and Roundup caused his cancer. So it took us that many years of organizing to finally shift public opinion enough in order to see some change. It was the issue that brought me to the state capitol, the Florida state capitol, for the past 3 years, was the fight to pass a statewide fracking ban. I don't know if you're familiar with this. Back in 2014, they attempted to pass fracking regulations in the Florida legislature, and that would have opened up the doorway for, again, the process of fracking involves injecting toxic chemicals into the aquifer, undisclosed because that's proprietary information. I don't know if you're aware, but Florida's geology is porous limestone. Our drinking water supply is fed from this aquifer. And if any of those toxic chemicals got into any part of the aquifer, it would have potentially poisoned our entire drinking water supply. We came this close to having those regulations passed, but once again, it was a citizen organized campaign right here in Miami that was able to get a handful of key state senators to flip their votes, and we were able to stop that. And for the past 3 years, I was part of a caravan going up to the Capitol specifically to lobby, specifically to call for, and meeting with legislators, asking them and educating them about the issue, asking them to support this statewide fracking ban. Well, here we are 3 years later, and we still don't have a statewide fracking ban here in the state of Florida. What is the purpose of the Florida legislature if we can't even protect our clean drinking water supply? And of course, the threats to our drinking water supply are numerous. You're probably familiar with the algae crisis that's unfolding in parts of Central Florida because of Lake Okeechobee. You're probably familiar with the red tide, all these mass die-offs, wildlife and of marine animals. And this is a situation that cannot be ignored. So it was these issues, it was these causes that brought me into the political arena and forced me to learn about how this system functions. And I was never planning on running for office. I was learning about the legislative process, not because I was interested in getting involved in government, but so that I could more effectively fight against all of these bills that would not stop coming down the pipeline. Well, it was last December when I thought about the governor's race for the first time. I thought, well, who am I going to support in the Florida governor's race? I looked at the candidates and I thought, I can't support any of these candidates. These candidates are so bad. I mean, I could run for office, right? And it was the first time the thought ever occurred to me, and I wasn't able to get that thought out of my head, because as I was extrapolating forward all of these problems and thinking about, we've just wrapped up 8 years of the Rick Scott administration, one of the most notorious governorships, in the entire country. And I thought, do you mean that there's been no legitimate, acceptable successor that's been groomed for Rick Scott in the Florida's governor's race, an election this important? So that's when I made the decision and looked up all the information necessary in order to get myself ballot qualified. Qualifying for the ballot is the most challenging thing that I have ever done. It required all the skill sets that I've learned over the years, and it required a major leap of faith on my part to challenge the system as an independent. You know, back in 2014, there was $1 billion spent in the Florida governor's race. I'm not a millionaire. I don't have deep-pocketed donors, and yet my concern about the future of this state was so overwhelming that I couldn't just sit back and allow this race to play out the way that it was. And so we did it. In late June, I was able to fundraise enough from small donors who were taking their chances in donating to a cause like this, and I was able to get my name on the ballot. So I will be on the ballot in November. Now, let's talk about, thank you. So let's talk about what I'm trying to, really the key focus of my message here is, let's turn Florida independent. We have to get rid of this two-party system. Let's talk a little bit about this two-party system, about the big money influence that flows into both sides, into both parties. We've gotten to the point where folks are not even thinking about the election in terms of who they're going to support. We are pretty much for everybody you talk to is being motivated by the fear of, well, I'm voting for this person so that that person doesn't win. I need to vote for this so that that doesn't happen. This is an unhealthy way to behave as citizens in a representative form of government. So how are we going to overcome this two-party system? How does this system function? Well, we don't actually have a two-party system by constitutional mandate. This is a matter of restrictive ballot access laws and the fact that the media is only interested in covering and talking about the two major candidates. And yet, thanks to the rise of the internet, we're now seeing for the first time the possibilities of the crowd-funded candidate. And that is the tradition I'm operating my candidacy within. Is it possible, using social media and using online platforms, to really challenge and really take on the system? Because when we look around at the current state of Florida, the state of the state, it's a pretty dire situation, from the ecological crisis to the economic crisis is one of the most unequal. The wealth inequality is it's the second in the entire country. This is the headquarters of the largest concentration of international banks in the country. And yet you don't really see the wealth here. You look at the decisions that are being made in the county commission. I don't know if you're aware, they just voted to extend the 836 expressway deeper into the Everglades. They agreed to build, are you familiar with the American Dream Mall? Activists are referring to it as the American Nightmare Mall. A massive amusement park in the middle of the Everglades. These are the decisions that are being made that are going to affect us years into the future. So it's a pretty grim situation. And I've concluded, why don't you start by running at a local office and work your way up? I've come to the conclusion that things are so bad that it would require a revolution at the state level, some kind of a major political shakeup, if we're going to have any kind of a chance at getting these development patterns under control. So let's talk a little bit about my platform, what my proposed solutions are. Well, I've been using Miami public transportation for many years. My car was stolen back in 2007, so for many years I was using the public transportation system. And my assessment of Miami's public transportation system, I wouldn't even say that it's poor. I would describe it as an insult. It's an insult to expect commuters to stand out and exposed to the elements, unprotected, one bench, and that's what passes for a bus stop. We've seen the services cut over the years. We're not seeing the buses upgraded. We are in a situation where other countries, third world countries, have better public transportation systems than we have here in South Florida. We are orienting our development around car culture, and this has led to the 24/7 gridlock that I'm sure you probably experienced on your way over here. So by orienting our development around the automobile, this keeps us locked into the fossil fuel addiction. We don't have an option but to be fossil fuel addicts. So when we talk about how can we cut our carbon emissions, how can we address climate change, we have to start thinking long term. We have to start changing our regulations so that we rebuild our cities in tune with the best principles of new urbanism. There was the Miami 21 zoning code. We used to hear a lot more about that back in when it was originally passed. We don't hear that much about it anymore because these developers are wealthy enough to circumvent the process, to get a variance, a waiver issued, and that's what's led to all of this development that we're seeing, these massive parking garage structures, these abandoned downtowns. I mean, I really love urban cities, but Miami, most of the cities in Florida leave a lot to be desired. I mean, you go to Tallahassee, it feels like a complete ghost town. Miami, after 5 p.m., it feels like a complete ghost town. This is not the way that a city is supposed to feel. So, in terms of when I thought, well, how can we come up with solutions? How can we simplify all these issues down? Well, I came up with what I refer to as my 5-point plan, for economic revitalization. And that consists of, number one, improving civic engagement. Now, Miami is actually the least civically engaged city in the entire country. I don't know if you're aware of that. And this is at the source of so many of our problems, that folks are happy to complain about things as far as getting active, as far as volunteering, as far as learning about how to participate, how to speak at public meetings. We're not doing our job as citizens. We need to improve civic engagement. We need to make Election Day a holiday. We need to improve voter turnout. I support lowering the voting age to 16. It would have to be done by a constitutional amendment. A lot of folks think, whoa, they're not really ready to get on board with that. Well, I think that this is the right way to empower the youth. We all associate, when you turn 16, we all associate that with, oh, now you can get your driver's license. We think about these rites of passage. But once you're in their later years of high school, all you're thinking about is what college you're going to go to. Once you're in college, that's what you're thinking about. And this is preventing us from developing the next generation of citizen leaders. And so I support that initiative. I support ranked choice voting. So that way there's not a winner-take-all system. You won't have to worry about the spoiler effect. With ranked choice voting, you don't vote for one selection. You vote 1, 2, 3, your top 3. And so that the runoff takes place automatically. This is a much fairer and more equitable voting system. Number 2, I support the chartering of a Florida state bank, a state infrastructure bank, to fund our infrastructure projects. Believe it or not, the governor of New Jersey, who was just elected, he ran on a platform of chartering a state bank. He won, he was elected, and now they are exploring how to get that implemented. This is, I think, the right way to go, so we can finally put an end to this question of who's going to pay for it. Number 3, a Green New Deal for Florida. A Green New Deal for Florida, what's that all about? We need to create jobs and training programs so that we can build the infrastructure that's going to allow us to get off of fossil fuels. Build a 21st century transportation infrastructure. It's long overdue. We need to orient our budget towards these priorities if we're going to start alleviating some of these problems. Number 4, full legalization of marijuana, regulation with hemp industry incentives. Now, this is an idea that's time has already come. We're seeing the example in Colorado of how much revenue that it's generating for the state and how much money is being saved from locking up and incarcerating all these non-violent offenders. My vision is the climate here in Florida and in parts of South and Southern Florida, we have a year-round growing season, but we're not fully making use of the fact that we're an agricultural state. So if we just set aside some land, set up massive hemp farms, we could be the hemp supplier to the entire country. Why not? Once you get into northern Florida, once you get past that frost belt, you don't have a 365 a year growing season. All this potential is what we need to tap into to really get to the next level, to really get to the future, to really move forward. So legalize and regulate marijuana. This is something that passed. 71% of voters passed medical marijuana in 2016. If we can tap into those folks who voted for medical to support an independent candidacy for governor, we could have the numbers. We could have that support. You realize, despite the fact that we passed medical marijuana by wide margins, the state, the governor is still refusing to fully implement it. You still cannot grow your own plants even if you're a medical marijuana patient. There's no smokable. You can't smoke anything, and they're trying to keep it that way. They're trying to put the lid on it and go directly against the will of the voters. This is why we need a revolution at the state level. This is why we need a major upset, not 4 years from now, but in this election cycle. And finally, number 5, transition to 100% renewables by 2030, 2035, not 2050. That's what, I mean, if you're going to talk about transitioning by 2050, you might, I mean, that's, how many years away is that? What, 30 years away? That's not ambitious enough. We need to start setting ambitious targets in order to really start seeing movement in the right direction. So that's my 5-point plan for Florida. That's how I feel that we can start getting the state back on the right track. But it's not going to be easy, because what I'm suggesting my candidacy would destroy the two-party system. If no matter how many millions of dollars are spent by the Democrats and Republicans, if we can create enough of a consensus, if we can recognize that the two-party system is the money party system and decide to refuse to vote for Democrats and Republicans, that's how we can start taking the money out of politics, starting this election cycle. Because if an independent is able to be elected governor despite millions and millions and millions of dollars by the two major corporate parties, it would shatter the system forever. And that is what I'm trying to do. That is what my campaign represents. And so I'm going to need your support. We're going to need to get about 2 million votes to pull this off. So that's, in a nutshell, my plan, my thoughts. I would encourage you to check out my full platform right there on my website, just brucestanley.com/platform. I compiled all the years of work that I have done in the worlds of activism, in the worlds of organizing, and I put all that knowledge into what I feel is the most comprehensive plan for addressing the problems around the state. I don't refer to the education section of my platform as education. I refer to it as restoring teacher prestige. Restoring teacher prestige. Why? Because the teaching profession, the education system, has not done very well under the Rick Scott administration. One of his first acts in office was to cut $1 billion from the education budget, and the profession has never recovered. And now we're facing a teaching shortfall. Florida schools rank 28th in the country, and yet we are now the 3rd most populous state in the country. We need to start setting higher standards. We need to start becoming full participating citizens in the legislative process. That's the kind of enthusiasm that we really need. So, in closing, I would just say, this race, the 2018 Florida governor's race, is a perfect storm of an opportunity if I've ever seen one. And why is that? It's because all of the frontrunners are unelectable for various reasons. The Democrats and Republicans are all compromised. They're all either millionaires or they're taking money from billionaires. I don't want to see what it would happen to this state if any of these candidates, if any of these moneyed interests were allowed to take the reins of this state. I love it here. I don't want to have to move like so many young people end up getting squeezed out, end up getting brain drained out of South Florida because they can't find the right kinds of economic opportunities. They can't make it. We need a full 180 from this corporate-sponsored, big money direction that the country is going in. And that is why I want you to know, and I want you to spread the message. We can change all of this election cycle, this November. Anyone that you talk to, nobody knows who the next governor of Florida is going to be. No one is truly passionate about any of these front-runner candidates, this is the opportunity that I have committed myself to running the best campaign that I can, a clean campaign on the issues. And in closing, I just want you to think about that. I want you to imagine just looking at the political moment, how much anger there is at how broken everything is becoming, how betrayed folks feel about our political and economic leadership. And I fear that if either a Republican or a Democrat were to get elected in this race, it's going to rip the state in half because of how intense the emotions are. And I don't think any of these problems are going to get addressed. So on a positive note, I want you to please visit my website, just my name, real simple, brucestanley.com. Everything is on there, links to social media. If you could make a small donation, we're running a lean and mean campaign, but there are some fundamental materials and fixed costs that we're going to need to cover in order to come through on the finish line in November. Let's try to leverage social media to create enough of a buzz, enough of a momentum that the mainstream media simply can't ignore what's happening, and to earn some of that broadcast media in the last week and pull off a Hail Mary victory, the biggest upset in political history. That's what this is all about. So once again, thank you very much for coming out. Please follow my campaign. I think this is one of the most interesting races I've ever seen, and I am proud and happy to be a part of it. So thank you very much.